So welcome, everybody.
Okay. You guys ready in the back?
Good. Welcome, everybody. We're doing this a little differently this year. We really, and it's nice to come on the heels of the Baltimore Education Coalition Unity Forum last night. And, you know, now that my favorite algebra teacher on the planet just walked in, we can... I'm sorry, you really are great. Anyway, so I want to call the meeting to order. I don't know that we have to vote to open. Yeah. So thanks for coming. The idea tonight, after we hear from our senior senator, is to have Dawana sort of lay out the sort of framework for our legislative platform, just so we didn't start with a blank slate, because it's not like we're without thought. But we wanted to hear from people about what your ideas are, and I know there's some people, for example, from the arts community who couldn't be here tonight who are going to send some stuff after this. So we're going to, you know, have a process where we're going to take stuff in and then get ourselves all ready for the session in Annapolis. So with that, I'd like to turn it to Senator, and thank you for coming, Senator Carter Conway, and allow you from opening comments.
On? All right, I'm on now. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair and School Board Commissioners. I actually came here to listen and see what your issues were because I'm on my way to two other meetings. But very quickly, just based on what happened last night at Barclay School, as you can see that, you know, I am definitely supportive of their issues, no doubt, and I will continue to advocate for them. But briefly, I want to talk about Kerwin Commission. And the Kerwin Commission, you know, they're setting the building blocks for teacher preparedness and better performance and a number of other things. So there are policy issues, and those policy issues will actually come before Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. But the bigger piece about the Kerwin Commission, most people want Kerwin Commission finished. Kerwin Commission will not be finished until probably 2019, after everybody knows, probably after the election cycle. And basically, you know, they could, but there's still a number of things that they need to come to terms on. But the real reason is, and although many of the things in Kerwin Commission are very important, especially to Baltimore City in terms of the allocation of funding and those factors that they will utilize, like everybody wanted Thornton, you know, the bridge to excellence. And it was good. It was not a bad thing. But it was parity in Thornton because nobody ever took into consideration the poverty piece and those other issues. And hopefully in Kerwin Commission, those issues will be taken into consideration. So the higher percentages of those populations, we should be getting more money. The other piece is that, you know, it's going to be a revenue bill. And we understand that there's going to be a revenue bill. But a few of the things that the Baltimore Network Coalition, Education Commission, we're talking about in terms of, I don't necessarily think it'll be a down payment on Kerwin Commission, but we will be definitely advocating for increased money for school maintenance because it does take away from the classroom. So, you know, we'll be advocating there. And as usual, I will continue to put in my pre-K bill. And they never, ever pass it because they think it's only a Baltimore City bill. But last year I put it in and they did a whole, I guess, background, and they did a whole analogy of what each jurisdiction would get. Of course, many of them would get less because they don't have full-day pre-K the way that we do. So we spend a lot of money, $26 to $30 million in pre-K, and that takes away from a number of other things, but it's much needed to do so because the developmental years are so early, and it helps those students to progress. But even though they never pass the bill, they always give Baltimore City more money. So as long as I'm still standing there screaming and advocating about a fully funded pre-K, they continue to give us money. It would be a lot better, and I would be very, very happy because we would get a lot more money for pre-K if they would actually pass the bill. But then Baltimore City would actually be getting more money than probably anybody else. The other closer jurisdictions would probably be Dorchester, Prince George's would get a few more. But, you know, they rank the jurisdictions in terms of the socioeconomic piece. And that's basically as it relates to education. And the other hot issue is teacher preparedness. Yeah, that's a real hot issue in terms of when the teachers will be prepared, and it's really about the reading piece of it, because although and it's higher ed more than anything, how they instruct and prepare our teachers, because we want highly qualified teachers, and there's a lot of bills out there that's dealing with that. But right now, MSTA, they're not happy with the bill because they wanted to make it a task force. I talked to a number of individuals today in reference to teacher preparedness, but you'll probably see it. They need a Senate sponsor, and they seem to think the Senate sponsor is me.
Can I ask you a couple questions?
Sure,
On that
sure.
teacher preparedness, because in conversations with different settings with people, different people from Kerwin, including a presentation from Dr. Kerwin himself, they've talked about this teacher preparedness.
Yes.
And it's interesting because they don't control it, so it would have to come from some other, right? The Kerwin Commission itself isn't really not dealing with the higher ed
Exactly.
piece. So that's an interesting, but from Baltimore City, we certainly want highly qualified teachers. For us, we also need teachers in certain subject areas and people that want to teach and are trained to teach
Exactly.
in an urban setting.
Exactly.
I mean, there's like this mismatch there's like a notion out there that we don't want to hire teachers from our teacher colleges, but like send us what we need and we'll hire them all.
Well, see, that's the whole issue. And, you have to look at the unions, and you look at MSTA and all the other individuals who are associated in that educational field. See, the problem is, like you said, Kerwin Commission is not necessarily going to deal with that. That's a higher ed piece. But even though it's a higher ed piece in terms of teacher preparedness, what then happens if the teachers are not as prepared or highly qualified, although there's certification for those teachers, what happens, though, is that they don't really teach them, because we spend all our money in professional development. See, that's the issue. So if they are prepared when they come in, if they already have all of these skills and it's taught to them when they're getting their bachelor's and master's and all of that, all of these dollars that we're spending in professional development, we could leave it in the classroom. So that's the issue.
The other thing that you mentioned that I wanted to ask you about, you talked about trying to get more money for maintenance. And honestly, we would see that if we got more money for construction, maintenance, facilities in general,
Right,
that would be a
facility.
bridge to Kerwin as far as we're concerned. But I think that one of the things that we've been more concerned about lately, especially with the delay in Kerwin, is the Knott Commission and the recommendations that are going to be coming out of that around facilities. And our preliminary info is that it's not friendly to Baltimore City for the things that we need.
Well,
Do you know how that relates, like what comes out of the Knott Commission, how that relates to the legislative process? I should probably know this, but I don't.
Well, no, it's probably, it's a commission that's established to make those recommendations. And many times, none of it is relevant to the legislature in terms of what we actually do. But what you have a tendency to find is that when it's unfair or if it's problematic, then that's when your legislators step in and make a determination that we'll put in a bill to stop it, we'll put in a bill to amend it and make it more palatable or more fair. So, right now, we're not looking at it. We're waiting for all the recommendations. But just based on those recommendations, especially if it's harmful to Baltimore City and many of the other jurisdictions, we will, as a legislator, you can come up with a bill to change it.
Because we're going to want, I'm looking now at Melissa and Dewana. We're going to want to be in conversation with you and others when that all flows through, because we're feeling a little anxious about it, but we don't know yet, just like you. But
Right. No,
we're
we're
gonna
waiting
make some-
for the report to come out to see exactly what the recommendations are. And like I said, if it negatively impacts Baltimore City and our children, then we will probably take a look at it and enter or draft some bill that either exempts Baltimore City. As if you notice, the whole legislative session, everybody was doing a comparative analysis to every bill, especially if it had dollars in it or if it was impacting those jurisdictions in any manner. And it was always, well, is Baltimore City in this bill? Is Baltimore City exempt from this bill? So I told them, we have 23 other jurisdictions here, my colleagues, in Baltimore City. You need to find somebody else to compare, make your comparative analysis to. So it's always about Baltimore City down there. And although, I am the resident senator for the 43rd District, I'm always going to advocate and defend Baltimore City, and I will continue to do so as long as I'm there.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kashani, one thing that we did find out this week from coming out of Knott is that they have sort of put aside the idea of the sort of charter school pop-up strip mall kind of school construction. So that piece of the Knott Commission has moved to the side.
That's fantastic.
So that's a huge step for us.
It is a huge step.
And if we could continue to support that. Excellent. Anything else, Madam Senator?
No more questions?
Okay.
May I be
Commissioner,
excused?
Commissioner Bondima? Commissioner Bondima has a question or statement.
Oh,
okay.
a statement. I would like to make a statement. I want to say thank you to Senator Joan Carter Conway for coming to our forum. I really appreciate it because I do realize you did say that you have a number of places to go to.
3.
But 3 other places to go, and to make us your first, and the work that you do for the school in Baltimore City is just phenomenal. And I don't know how we can say thank you and to continue just doing what you're doing, and we just appreciate it. You always do what you say you're going to do, and if you can't do it, you'll say you can. And
What you
always,
see is what you get.
yes, and
And
we've seen
everybody
what we
knows that
have,
about
and we're
me.
happy to have you.
No,
Thank you so much.
Yes, it actually is my first stop because I have made education my priority. Okay, but thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Senator.
And thanks to my colleagues for getting us started tonight. Also, just for the record, to make sure that people know, Teresa Jones is here as the CEO's designee, and we'll be communicating with her any of the things along with Melissa and Dewana that are brought to the table tonight. So we are on to our first public comment person. Yes? No, I'm sorry. Oh, this is what happens when you show up late to your meeting.
That's fine. And my presentation is not very long because I know we want to hear from the public.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
We added a little bit of more informality to this last year. Can I ask you, AJ, that you might want to just maybe circulate among, there's a couple people that came late, if they have something, if they want to sign up late, we can loosen the rules a little bit tonight from our normal. Is that, you cool with that, AJ?
Me? I'm cool with anything.
Especially when it's
Madam
already on the
Chair,
record. Yeah,
are
no,
you-
I'm
are you-
absolutely not okay with it. No, I'm just
Carry on.
Excellent. All right, Dewana, thank you.
Sure, thank you, members of the school board. I am Dewana Merritt-Starrett. I'm the Director of Legislative and Government Affairs for the school board. And tonight, I will not make a long presentation because Commissioner Kashani indicated earlier that this year we're doing things differently. We are going to hear from the public first before we put out any sort of draft agenda. So we want their input before we do anything. And again, the development, I put that first. First, we're getting public input. Then we're going to meet with elected officials. We'll hear from our different associations, advocacy groups. PCAB, I will eventually go to. I know I sent an email to the
When
PCAB
Trish is
chair.
here.
that we were having this. So we are really going to try and include everyone before any decisions or potential decisions are made. But what I did want to do is just highlight some of the major issues that I see coming this year. Obviously, the budget, capital, and operating is always very important to us. Adequacy of funding, the senator spoke about the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, which is known as the Kerwin Commission. And this year, they plan to introduce policy recommendations that they intend to cost out. But we found out today, we had another 9:30 to 5 meeting of Kerwin, that they will not introduce their policy or have their policy recommendations ready until either January 8th or 9th. We thought it would be the end of the year, but now they're looking in January. And they've also added an extra meeting date because they are a little behind. We also have our Facilities Commission, the 21st Century Commission on School Facilities, which Commissioner Kashani mentioned, called the Knott Commission, who they will have recommendations this session. And I go into a little more later about some of the issues that we may have or we don't see discussed in the potential recommendations for Knott. Obviously, we always have the continuation of our city-state partnership as it has been amended, which will include 2 elected board members in 2022. The school calendar, which I think will be an issue, particularly it's because of the start before Labor Day and the end date of June 15th, which will become problematic in future years. We clearly do not want the General Assembly to mandate curriculum. At least that's always been a stance of the school board. And I don't think anybody would have any issues with unfunded mandates, that we should not have unfunded mandates. So specifically about Kerwin, here are some of the policy recommendations that I know that they are working on. And also I want to say that what I have here is the big global issues is it is consistent with what we heard last night with the Baltimore Education Coalition. They have 7 factors, and all 7 factors are actually in this PowerPoint. And I did not know them before I put this PowerPoint together, so it's nice to know that we all agree. So we have pre-K for at-risk 3-year-olds and universal pre-K for 4-year-olds. With funding resources. I remember specifically last year, Commissioner Chinney wanted to make sure we added that section about we want to make sure we have funding resources, but that's what Kerwin's looking at. Community schools, modifying the wealth calculations, that's the economic incentives. Those are the tax increment financing and the payments in lieu of taxes that occur in Baltimore City, or actually in the state. Not commission, which is the facilities commission. Things that we'd like to, that we know they're looking at is streamlining the school construction process, but I believe that right now the recommendation really falls short of really streamlining the school construction process, because it looks like their streamlining is merely removing Department of General Services and a few other little minor things. What they did not touch on, which I think we need to look at, and I hope the public will look at this issue as well, is removing partial funding for the public. That is when the school construction, they give us money, and they tend to, if we have a project that costs $5 million, they may decide to give us $2 million one year, $2 million in the second year, and $1 million the third year. Well, that sounds great, except for the fact that by the time you get all the money in the third year, the costs have escalated. And generally, we cannot forward fund to pay for that project because we do not have the local dollars to do that. So what may happen is that we may end up taking that project and rescinding it and having that money placed in a contingency fund for the school system, and which now actually is supposed to be reserved for us to be used for future projects in that year. But what the school construction program is doing now is taking that contingency money and using it as new money in the following fiscal year. So that's something that they aren't addressing in the facilities recommendations. We would like to see more additional items to be paid by the state, because right now things like what they call FF&E, fixtures, furnitures, and equipment, are not included. And I think they are looking at some things. Again, increased school construction. When they had the meeting, the last meeting of the NOC Commission, they made mention that they did not want to give a specific dollar amount of how much new school construction we should have, but they said that the state should not fall below what they currently are doing. Well, I don't think that's sufficient. And funding of systemics. Systemics are things that are mechanical systems within school buildings. And right now, most jurisdictions, and particularly Baltimore City, use a lot of their capital improvement program money, CIP money, for systemics. And there is a discussion that has not been quieted yet, that the NOC Commission is thinking of having the school construction funds to be paid just for major renovations or major new school construction, and not funding systemics, under the theory that if they don't fund the systemics, it will allow for the locals to pay that money because they consider it maintenance. And of course, we always have our annual CIP funding request, which is about $79 million. Right now, we know there's a preliminary recommendation of about $23 million, but then I believe it's like 13 or 10 million of that is from our school contingency fund, which I mentioned earlier, which is always a problem because it's not really new money. And so the next steps are to continue to meet with the partners, and then I will have drafts that I will be providing, and I will present the recommended legislative platform on January 9th to the school board for your vote. And if anybody has any additional comments or concerns that could not make it, they can send their comments to the school board at bcps.k12.md.us.
Thank you,
That's my
Tawana.
presentation.
Any questions from board members for Tawana?
You sent this to us already, didn't you?
It's on board docs,
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
If you want a hard copy, you can have mine, if you'd like it.
I can get it later.
Commissioner Canham?
So the funding of systemics, it just seems so basic that, I mean, so many of our boilers are HVAC systems. This needs to be part of our CIP request. I mean, where is that coming from? Who's driving, and how likely do we think that, because that's majorly problematic. So I could just say like a couple more
Well, I
sentences
think
about
the
that.
new executive director for the Interagency Committee on Public School Construction believes that the money should be used for major renovations and new construction. I had the opportunity to speak to one of the not commissioned members, I don't want to say who it is, who felt that they do not believe the systemics will see the light of day in the recommendations, but it's still out there. It hasn't actually been taken off the table.
Commissioner Shani?
Do you think they understand how problematic that is with us? I mean,
Well-
one can say as many times as they want that the local jurisdiction should pay for it, but that's not going to make money materialize.
Absolutely. I agree. And
Yeah,
we are
come-
not, and I want to say, we are not the only jurisdiction that would be impacted by that. In
Okay.
fact, when I was at the MABE Legislative Committee meeting, everybody in the room was like, how is that possible? Because many jurisdictions use the money for systemics. Mhm. That's it.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will then proceed with the public comment. As a reminder, even though we're a little bit more casual tonight, we're going to start with the 3 minutes, kind of try and hold people there. But if you need more time, we'll certainly try and accommodate that. And if there were people who didn't get to sign up, we'll circle back with you at the end. Happy to say we have 2 more people signed up than we did last year. Next year, maybe we'll get some students and everything, but hey, every little day. So Julie Oxenhandler, if you would like to join us, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Oxenhandler. I'm a 9th-year teacher in Baltimore City. I teach now at Afia Public Charter School in Bel Air, Edison, and I'm here tonight on... Great, thanks. My teacher voice wasn't loud enough, apparently. I'm here tonight on... I appreciate it. Thank you. I'm here tonight on behalf of Baltimoreans for Educational Equity, which is a community parent, teacher, student, and advocates group that pulls all over from every neighborhood in Baltimore City. And we're here tonight just to share sort of what our personal priorities are for the 2018 legislative session and how we hope to work in partnership with the school board during this time. So I've just prepared a brief statement so I can hopefully stay within the 3 minutes. We understand that the Kerwin Commission's work is a once-in-a-generation opportunity around an equitable funding formula for our state, and that getting this equitable formula will take the next 2 legislative sessions. Our focus for 2018 is building the foundations in policy and political will for the strongest possible outcome in 2019 for our students in Baltimore. To this end, we have 4 key priorities, which we will actively engage parents, students, teachers, and community advocates around throughout the 2018 season. The first of the 4 priorities is adequate and equitable funding that allows Baltimore City schools to provide the whole child supports that our students need, particularly focusing on those wraparound services. Secondly, acknowledging the full suite of services provided by effective community schools should be a part of the conversation on fully funding education. Third, building Baltimore's political will and education on issues affecting students to increase voter participation and make education the biggest issue in Baltimore and also across the state for 2018. And finally, slightly tangentially, making the casino funding a supplementary part of the Education Trust Fund rather than have it supplementing our general fund dollars. So these are the things that B plans to work on over the course of next year, and we look forward to working in partnership with the Commission. Thank you for having us tonight.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julie. Any questions? Go ahead, Commissioner Connolly.
I have a comment. That doesn't feel tangential. That feels, I'm curious. I'm curious why you think that's tangential, the casino funds.
It's more specific than the rest of the 3 more
okay.
general things. We don't think it's particularly in a separate bucket entirely, but it's a more targeted focus area for us.
And how did you, can you share your statement with AJ so that we can get it? I mean, I think it'll be easiest for us to take it all in if we,
Absolutely.
How did you say that, though? I like the way you said that. Do what with the casino funds?
I said.
Take it away from general and make it. into the trust fund.
Put in the
Educational
trust fund, yeah, I just didn't, I was
Yep.
trying to write it down.
Yeah.
Great listening skills.
Exactly.
audience.
So since you all try to help me, could you just read what you said again? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. Making the casino funding a supplementary part of the education trust fund rather than having it supplant general fund dollars.
Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
all.
and appreciate the work of B. Justin Nally and Kim Humphreys are next on the agenda. Good to see you both, thank you. It's been so long.
Hello. First, thank you to the chair and members of the board. My name is Kim Humphrey. I'm an education and legislative advocate for the ACLU of Maryland.
Good evening. My name is Justin Nally. I'm the Education Policy Analyst at ACLU of Maryland.
And we've mentioned it, but thank you so much for to those who attended the Unity event last night. Hugely important, and as you know, we work closely with the Baltimore Education Coalition, so a lot of the priorities that were outlined, we are in alignment with those personally as the ACLU, but we wanted to flag some of the other issues. Some will overlap, but there are other issues that will be of primary concern for us during the legislative session. 3 of those that we'll talk about tonight include full and adequate funding for public schools, school facilities support, which I'm glad has been raised already tonight, and the fair treatment of all students and positive school climate. So I will start with adequate and equitable funding. During the session, we will urge Maryland to provide a down payment, and what we mean by that is some form of action to show that you're committed. We know that they've said that they will delay. We believe the delay is unnecessary and unacceptable. We know that the student needs are not on hold, so we will expect that there is some action, especially for concentrated poverty. We believe that there should be more funding the higher the concentration of poverty. So we would like to see additional resources go to those schools. And to that end, we do support a community schools model, which has been flagged tonight. I'll also mention that we are in support of the full day pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. And we believe that by prioritizing these issues, that will look like making sure that these populations are first in any of the phase-in strategies and planning that's happening.
Next, we'll discuss the school facility support. A few years ago, Baltimore City secured funding for the $1 billion project to modernize school buildings because the city hasn't had school buildings in over 50 years. But because of our ability to get that funding for that project, the state has decreased money for the maintenance of all of our other buildings within the district. We will be working to ensure that Baltimore City is provided sufficient funding to operate efficiently older deficient school buildings. Funding must also be added so that the debt service payments that city schools makes on building improvements does not take away money intended for the classrooms.
And the last issue is we will support proposals that seek to reverse the school-to-prison pipeline. So this means paying particular interest to discipline disproportionality and disparities in student arrest, which continue to be an ongoing issue in our state. And we're focusing on, restorative practices and, changes to the climate and a real shift to the culture in schools. So we do thank you for being a leader in this. We hope that there will also not just be a statement around changes to programs and approaches, but that there will be additional funding for staff and the other supports that are needed to help schools make that transition.
Once again, we thank you for your continued support as we work together for this legislative session and beyond so that we can ensure that Baltimore City students get the education that they deserve.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you both as individuals and your partnership with the ACLU. Commissioner Canham?
I had a couple questions. So the down payment, the idea of a down payment, do you all have a prioritization on what that would look like, where we would focus in this legislative session for a down payment? And the other question I had was, you mentioned full 3 and 4 day,
Full day.
full day pre-K for 3 and 4. Last night at the Beck event, people talked about pre-K for 3-year-olds from low-income backgrounds. But you're saying for you're advocating for all 3 and 4-year-olds.
Yeah, and the distinction there is just that the conversation is already around 4-year-olds. So I think they
Right.
were just making it clear to add the 3-year-olds. But yeah, we would like to see
For
full
all.
day for 3 and 4. And there have been some concerns about if 3s are possible. So we're saying prioritize the low-income 3-year-olds when you do that. But we do believe that there will be movement on 4-year-olds for everyone.
For
full day.
everyone.
Yeah.
But then you so talk to me, what is the ACLU stance on the 3-year-olds? Is it just
That-
for low income?
That a 2-year program is the most beneficial,
Okay.
and especially since we have ongoing achievement gaps.
Yeah.
When you are just doing the same thing for everyone, it just continues the long-standing gaps. So that's why we emphasize that there has to be a focus on 3-year-olds and especially low income.
Okay, got you.
Also, when you phase in, if you're phasing in preschool or pre-kindergarten, we want to make sure that the low-income 3s and 4s are, as Kim mentioned, prioritized first, if we have a phasing in
Gotcha.
priority as we go along in pre-K.
Okay. So then, back to my down payment question. There, you listed a lot of things. If you had to put a down payment on one, what would you prioritize your top 2? Is that the way you're thinking about it?
So I essentially highlighted 2 of the issues. When I talk about concentrated poverty, that is the major issue. As the senator was talking, she was explaining that we have not really focused on poverty, even though our formula is intended to not only provide adequate, funds, but equitable funds. So we have to target where the need is. So we mean concentrated poverty and pre-K, I think, would be the primary focus.
Thank you.
I also think it's really important to begin the discussion pretty systemically about 3 and 4, so that people like, on my day job, people like higher ed, start to get together and get early childhood programs so that we get enough highly qualified teachers to be able to do the work that's so necessary.
Absolutely, and if I can just add, there was a mention about the teacher prep conversation that's happening right now with the Kerwin Commission, and they are, there's no indication of exactly how it would roll out, but they are considering, diversity, not enough conversation on diversity of teachers, but they are having a lot of conversations and will be making some recommendation about what higher ed should be doing. And so I don't know if it was clear, but they are having those conversations now. So if you are, having thoughts about how that should go, it's very important to make that clear as soon as possible.
And if anyone wants more information on that, if you look at the minutes of, I believe that was the November 9th state board meeting, there was an update on that, the committee's work process on teacher certification licensure in Maryland. Commissioner Kashani?
Yeah, I'm curious, I think that's a really important point about the trying to give input to that, because it seemed clear just from, again, the presentations I've heard from Dr. Kerwin that they were going to say something about it, but that it's really beyond their purview, and then they'll have to hope that some other set of actors takes up that recommendation. But let's have faith for a moment. So I guess I'm looking right now at Melissa and Dewana, because Linda is not here, Linda Chinny. Are there openings and opportunities for us to say something about the higher ed piece? Because I think our issues are, as the senator was talking, we certainly want qualified, certified, all that, but we have gaps in certain types of teachers, and the notion of truly preparing somebody who wants to teach in the city. So I'm just curious, like in the meetings that you guys hang out in, I asked for Dewan and then for
Absolutely.
Melissa.
I think higher ed has been on their purview, and I think it was no mistake it wasn't by chance that Britt Kerwin was named the chair of the commission. So I think higher ed is something that they are struggling with how to do it, because there was a mention in one meeting that higher ed does not move so quickly, and it takes a lot to make changes, but it has been something that has been part of their dialogue.
If you
I
could
would just add that
Can you introduce yourself to
Oh,
the?
I'm sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Melissa Broom. I'm the legislative director for city schools on the staff side. I would just add that they said today that of the work groups, the subgroups that the Kerwin Commission is going to be forming during session, that it's very likely that one of the individual work groups will focus on teacher preparedness and teacher quality. So to answer your question about whether there will be opportunity to weigh in for us and for all of our partners, absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, that Commissioner Chinny had told me that MABE had asked her to be on some kind of a teacher preparedness work group, task force.
Yeah, they have,
No, Dr.,
yeah, they have various ad hoc
Yeah,
committees
Linda.
that, yeah.
so that would be, and she'd be perfectly suited to do that. Because I think it's not just about, having enough high-quality teachers. We need certain things.
Right.
And it would be great if higher ed was responsive to that for us, so. Good. All right.
Thank you again for being here, and thanks for your continued support and partnership with the schools. Next on our list is Davon Love.
All right, good evening. Last night I was at the BEC event. My understanding with this would be more of like a work session where we talk about legislative priorities. So my comments, I both have something to say that's more paradigmatic, a little bit more fundamental, and then some suggestions that may take more like 5 to 6 minutes, if that's okay.
We
So I just
welcome your
wanted-
comments.
So my name is Davon Love, Director of Public Policy of Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, a political grassroots think tank that addresses issues that most directly affect people of African descent in Baltimore. We both do advocacy work, but also train young people in public policy using the tool of policy debate. And just to kind of give my comments some more context, I'm a person who graduated from Forest Park High School and was a school teacher at Connections for a couple of years. Didn't teach a tested subject, but taught an elective around debate and social justice and African American studies. And have been coaching debate for years and years and years with public school students. So I just wanted to, provide some context there. One of the things that's glaring to me, and it actually makes my head explode sometimes that it's not a bigger part of the conversation, is that many of the institutions that are at the helm of ed reform are squarely situated within the ecosystem of white-led human social service entities that have essentially for several decades have been tasked with driving the agendas of the various industries that are situated within human social service, and education being one of those. And so a part of what has been happening over the past few years is that there's a greater level or a greater appetite for conversations around racial equity. In my estimation, that increased appetite for notions of racial equity in these conversations is an admission of the impotence of the leadership in these various industries in their abilities to produce outcomes for young people. And particularly when we think about a city like Baltimore, a majority black city, we tend to find that there's a level of paternalism that exists between this ecosystem of white-led human social service entities and the kinds of methodologies of service delivery that come from the communities most directly affected by these issues. And so one of the things that I know that I've personally experienced is that a lot of folks who have been driven out of the sector because their approaches actually embody what many people describe as racial equity, but undermine the leadership of industries whose practices and ability to maintain leadership and power in the sector are threatened by alternative methodologies that would essentially deem those who have been leading the work on ed reform as not really being qualified to lead that reform. And there's a certain arrogance that exists within that ecosystem of institutions. And the way that they've been able to perpetuate their power and leadership is essentially by ignoring a lot of voices that have been pushing against that dynamic. And unfortunately, particularly a lot of black-led grassroots organizations don't have the institutional capacity to engage in the level of policy engagement interaction as some of their counterparts that just have more resources at their disposal, greater levels of social capital, et cetera. And so in terms of emptying this into a suggestion as in terms of legislative and structural changes, one of the things that I'm concerned about, even my peers, I turned 30 back in May, and a lot of my peers who are from Baltimore do not want to put their kids in the public school system. And much of that has to do with the fact that much of the experience of our own experience in the school system and those of some of our younger siblings, with the greatest attempts and with the greatest level of intentions to do well, many of the folks that are put in front of our young people and many of the institutions that are tasked with developing procedures and curriculum from our young people just are not qualified to produce the kinds of experiences for young people that truly empower them. And most of the experiences that many young people have that actually contribute most to their intellectual development and their ability to be an actor in their communities and their environments have been programs that are squarely situated in the community, that are very rigorous, that have high levels of expectations for the young people, but again are not institutionalized either in the ed reform movement or the public school system in general. One of the things that I really suggest is that that there is a concerted effort within the school system and legislatively to mandate that there is a unit within the school system that specifically focuses on racial equity, that has power to drive the policy, drive the nature of the kinds of educational experiences that students are provided with. Unfortunately, racial equity has become a buzzword, so it's really easy to say, you know, we believe in education and mix in some of this race stuff, right? That's essentially the way that people kind of treat the notion of racial equity, and many people that I think are deploying it in the human social service sector are doing so really as a mechanism to protect themselves from what is becoming very evident, the lack of the ability of these institutions to really be able to carry out the task of properly educating young people in Baltimore to be fully self-actualized human beings. And so if there is not an intention, and to me it's actually amazing that we can have ed reform as a moniker and have folks at the helm that they themselves would admit are not trained extensively in the idea of how you would operationalize what racial equity is. It's amazing to me in a majority black city that you can have ed reform that will admit its lack of understanding and ability to operationalize what racial equity looks like. So I would hope that the school board and BEC and other concerned institutions and organizations would invest both in a unit within the school system that explicitly focuses on racial equity. Baltimore County has something similar to that regard, but also generally an investment in a coalition of organizations that have mechanisms of accountability to the communities they serve, that reflect demographically the communities they serve, that are resourced and able to be the drivers of ed policy in Baltimore. Because there are a lot of people that are not coming to the BEC events, people that are not coming to the school board because they're disenchanted because they see the same players who have the same relationships with the same organizations, and the folks who want to do the work are excluded from those networks. And so people aren't going to show up. Even myself, when the school construction piece was happening a few years ago, I chose not to participate because I understood the kinds of organizations that were at the table and that I would merely be a token that would be used to forward an agenda that would not substantively put at the center notions of racial equity. And so for me, it's really this is an invitation really for folks to take the time to invest in infrastructure that would institutionalize this concern beyond just a thing to say that we added to our proposal that we were already going to do, but invest in an infrastructure that would drive this process that is more reflective of what racial equity is, both in the literature and in practice.
Excellent, thank you. Questions?
I just want to thank you.
Commissioner Kashani?
I just want to oh, go ahead. I didn't know you.
No, I just want to make a statement. I'm very impressed with what you just said in your statement. And I would ask that you continue to come to the board and make those type of statements, because I'm listening to what you're saying, and I could have a long conversation with you about it. I tell you something, I'm a scientist, but I spend a lot of time just looking at policy, racial equity, all those things, and what you just brought to us requires this much, not this much. And 3 minutes, 6 minutes is not enough time to have that kind of conversation, but it's a wonderful opportunity for you to continue coming and adding to what you're saying so we can have that kind of conversation. Because you're exactly right. It is critical that we get in, continue so we could go somewhere with it. And that's, what I'm saying is not enough, but I would encourage you to continue coming. And so when we have our full public meeting and the board can hear what you're saying. Okay?
Commissioner
Thank you.
Shani? Thank you.
Thank you. I take it both as a solidly awesome idea and a challenge, so got it. And it reminds me of an ongoing, I don't want to call it a debate, because you'd actually know the difference, but an ongoing conversation I've had with Jay Gillen over the years, and have come to, from my time on the school board, just a little over 4 years now, believe that if we do all these things, like if we got more facilities money, if we got pre-K, 3-4-year-olds, like we need all those things. Even in the structure as it stands now, with the same people running stuff, we still need all those things. But I've come to believe that there's still a whole group of kids, even with more maintenance money, even more, that we're not reaching. And it's for these reasons.
Well, and
we're not reaching everybody. I don't want to isolate just a certain level of kids, because that demeans part of what you're saying, because it's more systemic than that. But it's particularly for kids that just aren't going to be reached for whatever reason, that really does demand a different look.
And I think a part of the issue is that most people's understanding of what's being called in the sector the culturally responsive pedagogy. One of the limitations is that many people see it as additive to what'll be more effective in terms of instruction and in terms of experience for young people, good experiences for young people. And a lot of folks don't understand that as a necessity, as something that enhances their practice, both in terms of structuring programs to provide good opportunities for young people and being able to more effectively teach young people. And a part of the reason that distinction or that mix-up happens is because many of the institutions that are training professionals in the arena of education are not reading the works of Black folks who have built institutions in communities, both historically and contemporaneously, that have addressed these problems in ways that folks in the mainstream sector wouldn't have thought about. I'll give you an example. Baltimore is home to Coppin State. Most people don't know that Coppin State is named after Fannie Jackson Coppin. Fannie Jackson Coppin was an excellent educator in her own right in the late 19th and early 20th century. And she actually wrote a book in the early 1900s because she became the director of the Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia. And she was there for about 35 years. She was actually so good that her and her husband went to South Africa the later years of her life to start a school. And so in it, so the first part is autobiographical, but the second half of the book is a manual for how to teach geometry, how to teach grammar, how to teach spelling, right? So this is from a person who has 35 years of experience in directing an institute aimed at teaching Black children, right, in an institution prior to Brown versus Board, But again, many of the professionals who are in the education sector are not reading folks who have been immersed in the work in terms of addressing these concerns. And so I think, to your point, a part of the issue is that you can have more money, have better facilities, but if you're not equipping professionals to more effectively deal with the folks that they're teaching, then you're only going to get but so far.
Just one other thing, and I agree with you. Lisa Delpit, Other People's Children, Gloria Latson Billingsley, the deal with cultural pedagogy, responsive cultural pedagogy in the classroom. So I can name a bunch of other people and I agree with you. So that's why I'm saying, and I want to end on this, just saying that, I think that what you're bringing to the table is something that we need to hear. Okay, and I would ask that, you come as often as you can and spend your 3 minutes and keep and keep on letting us know and adding to what you're bringing to the table, that this is not enough time.
Yeah.
And
And
it's very
if I can say
interesting.
something quickly about that, one of the two aspects of reluctance for that, the first is that community folks are often asked to contribute a lot for free, right? So a lot of times you have professionals that are paid to come to meetings and do this, right? But if you're, a person that's a grassroots organization, you often aren't asked, you're not seen as an expert that can provide in that capacity. So that's one reluctance. That's not so much an issue for me in this current moment, but that's traditionally been the case. But the other reluctance is that what I don't want to do is I don't want to give a presentation to provide a lot of, lay out some of the things that I've talked about so that folks can go and do what they're going to do anyway and claim they heard it. So I would really want to have a conversation even prior to the presentation, like have a conversation about a series of commitments about the extent to which the board and the CEO would be willing to act on the things that would be presented to them. Otherwise, I don't want to waste my time.
Thank you. Commissioner Canham?
Thank you for your thoughts. I've been struggling forever of why we have such a culture of low expectations across the city of what we believe our students can accomplish. Because we can go from one school that's knocking it out of park with our youth and go right down the street. And in most schools, that our students aren't performing where they need to be. And I believe diversity, equity, and inclusion, how we kind of infuse that in how we teach and train our teachers is an absolute essential component, if not the central thing that we need to be kind of working with our teachers, all of us, our board, our staff on. So I really appreciate your comments, and they really ring true as well. To me, where have you seen models, in Baltimore nationally that we could go see, that you feel like is demonstrating the approach and the outcomes for youth that you want to see?
So I'm gonna give a couple of examples. One of the things I want to preface it with is that a part of the issue is the reason why it's difficult to go and see some of these programs in action is because many of them struggle in terms of resources, and so they come and go. So one example is the Marifa Center that actually closed a few years ago, that existed for a number of years. And in fact, a lot of prominent elected officials have sent their children there, including like Nick Mosby sent his kids there when it was an elementary school. Heber Brown III, who's a pastor at Pleasant Hope, sent his children there. It was an African-centered institution that was operated out of a house, actually in the neighborhood that I grew up in, that had my academic advisor at Towson University sent his child to the Marifa Center. And it's one of those things that most people don't know about because you have to be in a certain network of folks that would know about it to know. Again, unfortunately, it's closed, and the closest thing to it is Inter-Roma Academy, which operated for 10 years, but it had to close because it didn't have the resources to do all the regulatory things you got to do when you operate a school. You got to fix the roof, you got to have certain licensures and things that just cost money that grassroots organizations can't afford. In terms of an example that I can speak to directly, Baltimore, so in 2008, myself and my debate partner, Devin Cooper, who's a graduate at Lake Clifton in 2004, won a national debate championship in 2008. Before that, there had only been one black person to win a national championship. Since then, there have been 15 of us. Of the 15 of us, six of the national champion black folks that have won are from Baltimore. Right? And that's something that a lot of folks don't know about, right? A part of why, this is kind of my theorizing about this, the reason why most folks don't know about is because the practice in debate that we trained young people in talks explicitly about the system of racism and white supremacy and how it operates. And I would argue that the reason that folks have such low expectation is because we live in a society structured on racism and white supremacy, and it's only been recently that there's even an ability to have that conversation in public in a way that can drive policy. One quick story that I'll tell as a teacher that I think really illustrates that. When I was a teacher at Connections, so when we won nationals, the school there was a big picture that was made of myself, my debate partner, and the trophy. I put it up. I didn't really say anything about it. I just had it up. And so one day my student said, "Mr. Love, who is this other person in this picture with, and what is this about?" I said, "Well, when I was in college, I was one of the best debaters in the United States." And they said, "Mr. Love, why are you lying?" And so I kind of laughed and I said, well, why do I have to be lying? They said, Mr. Love, because if you're all that, why are you here with us? Right? So that's really the psychology that a lot of young people are dealing with that comes as a result of a society where we internalize notions of white supremacy and black inferiority that our young people both act on, but many of those who come into cities like Baltimore internalize notions of white supremacy and operationalize them in the classroom without knowing it.
All right, thank you very much. Lots of food for thought, lots of things to think about. One of the things that I think about in reflecting on your statement is that the problem with a unit, it becomes like Black History Month. It becomes this set-aside special piece. So I really think we need to look systemically at both what and how we're teaching kids. How are we finding space for student voice? How are we creating agency? How are we investing in people's minds and bodies and spirits in order to address this? One request I would have for you is to figure out how we legislate some of these things. And how can Baltimore City Schools stand in a platform of legislation to support some of these outcomes?
Right. Well, when I say unit, I want to be clear. I'm saying an entity that has power within the school district.
And I'm saying we have some power as a district, and in this forum of developing how we're going to speak to and persuade our legislators, if there's some actionable or operationalizable pieces that you can see to this, would be great to get your thought partnership on that one.
And got it on the unit.
One, and then last thing, back to you were not tested subject. You were an indirectly tested a subject because 100% you taught those kids how to do perseverance, how to do deep critical thinking, how to do problem solving, and all of those things are indirectly tested on all of those tests. So you mattered a lot. So thank you. Is there any, we have one, we have more, thank you. Is it, I'm going to go with Sharala? Shamarla. Yes, I apologize.
She's our girl from last night. So what was the thing? Delay. Delay.
I remember that. That's great.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, do it.
No.
We got three things too.
Delay.
It's not okay.
Oh, I'm glad you all remembered. So I was obviously the MC at the BEC event last night. We had some good times. It was very great can you guys hear me? It was great to just really have the rally to unite our city. I think that there are just an idea that there's two Baltimores going on. And so we wanted to hold this event so that we're all united in some stance. We're not going to agree with everything, but we need to unite. So my name is Shamarla McCoy. I'm the Education Policy Director at ACY. I've only been working with ACY for about 4 months now. Prior to working with ACY, I was
Shamarla, can you tell us what ACY is for the record?
Oh, I'm sorry. Advocates for Children and Youth. So we're pretty much a policy think tank. We focus on the whole child, so we have child welfare, health, education, and juvenile justice. So a lot of our priorities have to go together. So I'm new to the policy space. Prior to coming to ACY, I was a teacher in Baltimore City Public Schools. I also taught in various countries in Africa. So I have a lot of experience working with children, particularly children of high need and Black children. So one reason why I came on board with ACY is because we're ready to move towards racial equity. And I had options, so I want to always be clear. Like, I came to ACY to bring a racial equity framework to education, and I intend to make that happen. I want to start with a quick story about my experience as a teacher, if that's okay. And then I'll move into some policy priorities because I think it's really relevant. I taught under the Thornton administration. I was a high school Spanish teacher. I came to the district with about 5 years of previous experience. And in the evenings, I went to the University of Maryland School of Law, and I was a part-time law student. And so I lived in a very polarized world for for about 4 years. And so, you know, the Freddie Gray so-called riots, we had finals still, and I taught still, and it happened the same day. You know, these things were going on, and so I would see these polarized worlds. So this is why I'm in this space. But as a teacher, one of the hardest things that I had to experience was going through the murder of one of my students. You know, great kid, smart. He had a lot of challenges, certainly, but I was like the only teacher that he would at least pass with a D, because I made the environment so that they can learn. It was mandatory. So I was the teacher that had piles of papers at the end of the marking quarter, you know, late work, extra credit, so many different types of ways they could show me that they knew. They could do paintings, they could rap, they could draw, anything to show me that they could learn this material. And this particular student did that, and he came to me first quarter and said, "You're the only class I passed with a D." It wasn't the best grade, but I was really the only class that he passed. So I started to be like a mentor, a mother, just everything, a teacher. It was very taxing, the relationship, and this was one out of about 160 on my roster. But long story short, he was murdered. He was murdered, and his best friend was also my student, and he came very just distraught, wanting comfort, coming to the school for assistance, for help, for love, and he was sort of pushed out, like, you're doing too much, you have to go, like, you can't be in this building, in this space. And so, you know, I'm looking over his paper, I'm looking over grading papers, and I come across his name, and I realize he's not here anymore. And he's 17, and he's gone. And I literally had a breakdown in the classroom. I didn't know what to do. I mean, you can't learn that stuff in any school, like any college. There's nowhere that you can really learn how to deal with that until you deal with it. These are like your kids, you know. And then one of the veteran teachers, she sort of rubbed me on the back and said, "Oh, this is your first time." So I started to really look at the sort of psychological things that are going on in these spaces that we're teaching young people. And so I can only imagine what they are experiencing. So I came into this space because I want to make schools safer. I want to make the climate more engaging. I want teachers in the classroom to care about the students above all else. I want teachers in front of our students that actually care about them and their lives. I want culturally relevant curriculum for them. I want them to learn about themselves, who they are. I want them to have opportunities to reach the highest heights. I have a very high expectation. I want them to advocate for themselves and be empowered. So there's so many things that I want to see a Baltimore City public student have, and I want the teachers in front of them to have the supports that they need as well, particularly restorative circles, restorative practices, trauma-informed best practices for teachers even to deal with some of this trauma. And I want a school environment to be a community environment. I want my students and all of our students to feel like they're coming home when they come to school. I want them to be safe. So this is the reason why I'm in the education policy space. I have some one-pagers that I'm going to distribute to you guys, just going over our legislative priorities. Again, some of these are redundant, so I'm not going to read them at all. Due to the Kerwin delay and in the recommendations, we actually are going to take this time to reframe our entire legislative approach, specifically to looking through a racial equity lens, and it's not just a buzzword. It's more, we think that's where we're owed. Like, the state owes Baltimore City public students money, and it's because they're Black. And that's really the only reason. I don't know if you guys listen to rap music, but Jay-Z has a lyric that says, "Pay us what you owe us for all the years that you hold us." And so what that means is through racial equity lens, we're going to get the money another way. So we're going to really inject the conversation into the school finance formula. It may seem radical, or we may stand alone, but we are looking for a way to inject a proxy or something into the school finance formula. So I'm going to just give you guys this, and okay. So the same things that everyone's saying, we're looking for substantially increase the per pupil base and weights. We're looking for more funds and for concentrated poverty. Right now the approach is sort of flat, so we're looking to push for a non-linear approach. We want to also expand early childhood opportunities, and we want to adopt an effective poverty proxy. But the real issue is race, because it's not coincidental that where there's high concentrations of poverty, those students are Black. So this conversation requires us to develop and strategize a little better, because it is new to the space. When I came into the space, I thought this was the conversation already in terms of financing, and I realized that it hasn't really happened the way it needs to happen. I want to just turn to the back of this paper, because you guys can read quickly everything. It's pretty much the same thing. But I want to talk about what ACY, the types of bills that ACY will support, and also what we will oppose. Obviously, we're going to support bills that expand access to high-quality pre-K for low-income 3-year-olds. And we're also looking at increasing the child care subsidy for birth to 3-year-olds. We think that if we get dollars from maybe health and other departments, we can sort of work together to collaborate for the 3-year-old population, and we can work in the school finance formula for 4-year-olds, because basically there's no room in the finance formula for 3-year-olds. So it would have to we would have to change law to add 3-year-olds to pre-K, or we have to find those funds somewhere else. So we're looking at options in the Department of Health in addition to the school finance formula. We will support bills, obviously, that...
Can we pause for just a second?
Oh,
in
I'm
case
sorry.
Commissioners have questions, so that we can wrap up to get to the next person.
Okay.
Since we have this in writing, and it seems really clear and really well thought out, so I appreciate that. Are there questions or comments?
No, I was just,
I think you did.
That's okay?
Yep, if you want to do the last 3 bullets, just really quickly.
Okay,
for us,
yes, I
that'd be
do
great.
want to do the last bullets because they're important. The last bill actually is the most important, which is what we will oppose. We work a lot with climate issues, and school to prison pipeline issues, and funding is a part of the school to prison pipeline as well, not just discipline. But we will oppose bills that overtly or covertly increases funding for school police and school resource officers, or expands their role and or presence in city schools. So that's all. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Commissioner Kashani?
my only comment is that, you come on the heels of Devon's comments, so I think, where you said you might stand alone, it might be too radical, whatever, it doesn't seem, that's a great way to use the extra time.
Okay,
Right? And
thank you.
Well,
in terms of, when I say radical, in terms of the school finance formula itself, because there's some racial inequities within the structure of having a school finance formula, and we can go on and on about that, but we want to inject it into the formula. So that's the
Yeah, no,
radical
appreciate
part.
it.
Thank you.
Institutions are uniquely designed to get the results that they get, and if we don't change the institution, we don't change the results. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
Tara Powell.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. I am a parent, and I thought coming to this meeting would be very important because there's another issue that I haven't heard about tonight, and that's special education. It's a huge issue. I'm a parent of 2 special education children that have come through Baltimore City. One is now at a non-public placement that I won, and the other is pushing through at a Tunbridge Public Charter School, but she's dyslexic. My issue tonight is going to piggyback off of everybody's comments, is that teachers aren't prepared. There needs to be something money-wise, funding-wise, to deal with the higher ed. My oldest son has a whole gamut of issues, special ed-wise, that was not dealt with properly through special education in this district. That's another fight for another day. Tonight, my daughter is dyslexic, and she's at a charter school, one of the best charter schools in the city. Why am I struggling to find her a research-based, structured literacy program to help her as a dyslexic child? I'm struggling with that in her IEP right now. So my issue is, if the teachers coming out are reading specialists, they're not even touching some of the specialized groups within that, dyslexia being one. There is information out where the Decoding Dyslexia Maryland has done a lot of systemic work, they've done a lot of legislative work, and they want to make sure that the word dyslexia is said, the word dyslexia is put into the IEPs, and that's just one portion of the special ed piece that needs to be fixed. Trained educators are crucial, because if you cannot come up with a way to do the 1 year plus, that's a problem. And you're not going to continue to blame my child because you're not trained to close the gap. So as a parent, like I said, the other issues I have with the special education department here in the district, that's another fight for another day, and I could go on to tell you the things that my son has gone through, the trauma that he has suffered through this district because there are untrained teachers. Classroom management doesn't exist. And they don't know how to handle or teach, especially an inclusive child. Okay, so that's my lane. The inclusive child who has an IEP or a 504 plan, they aren't being serviced properly. Something has to change, and it should change at the top where these people are coming out of college. They need to be better trained. 1, to be in a district like Baltimore City. 2, to deal with the special education population of those types of students in Baltimore City. So that's a whole other level that needs to be dealt with. So just my point is, monies need to come and deal with higher ed, because students are, it's criminal. It's criminal the way Baltimore City has done generations of students, especially those who have special needs. That's all.
Comments from Ms. Bell? Questions?
No, I mean, I think it goes back to Dewana's original presentation, and Melissa's comments as well, that Kerwin's going to, they're talking about higher ed, they're going to create a work group on higher ed. That's lovely, but it needs to, we have some sub needs that whether or not those will be addressed, it's not entirely clear, but.
Well, I mean, I know we have PCAB, I know we have, CCAC. I don't know how active they are. I used to work for CivicWorks, Baltimore Education Network, and we were collaborative with BEC. So I know that whole gamut. But special education has been one issue that nobody's really touching, in my opinion. They're not touching it. And since having 2 children dealing with it, I want to advocate for parents because they just don't know. I had to learn the hard way. So,
And when it comes to this legislative funding, if the federal government would fully fund IDEA, would go a long way to supporting getting the professional development and the targeted services. Commissioner Berkeley.
I also learned the hard way with my children, one in particular. And so I would love to know how to reach you, because
Sure.
I have some thoughts for you, just mother to mother,
Okay.
that might be helpful.
okay. Thank you so much.
Commissioner Cannon.
The only thing I'd raise, well, thank you for bringing attention to this, number one. Nationally and here in Baltimore, it is our most critical shortage area for special education teachers. A pipeline of well-trained people who, professionals who are well-trained that can service the needs of our students. And so, yes, we've got to think about higher ed. We've got to think about we've got to think just how do we broaden the net, because every year we're faced with challenges. And recently I've been in classrooms, and I was just floored about how poorly the instruction was done for. And again, when we talk about low expectations, it was the lowest of low expectations for middle school students. And so what you bring to us is an absolute critical need that we need to address.
Yeah, and it saddens me. And to be honest, way before, my oldest son, I have a blended family, and so my middle son is not my biological, but I have raised him since he was 1 year old, and I have fought for him. I've done the Kennedy Krieger. I've brought in things for teachers, and it's frustrating as a parent to do their job that they're paid to do. I am the number one advocate, and I'm going to fight for my children, but I need a good partnership. I need teachers who are willing to listen, and just because you have the degree, I have a degree too, working on another one, but just because you have a degree, that doesn't make you the expert on that individual child. So that's where I'm coming from. It's really just kind of frustrating to see the special education students, how they're treated. Their gaps aren't being, closed. IEPs are poorly written because they're not understanding the individual child. So that's just a big, crucial thing for me.
When we talk on this committee about creating an equity policy or a policy on policies, well, we all know that race is something we need to tackle straight on and head forward in this community. So is special education. And it really is an equity issue to ensure that each student, whether they are identified as gifted and talented, whether they are identified as having special needs, or they are typical middle-of-the-road regular kid.
Right.
Equity is really equity for all. And so this is an important part of that conversation and does have some significant funding and professional development implications. So there's also great teachers out there doing great things.
They are, and I can
And one of the
speak to that.
challenges in higher education is until a teacher teaches, it's really hard to get more information. We can lecture and talk, but until you really experience working with kids, it's really hard. So that just like we need to look at education as pre-K 21, we also need to look at teacher development as undergraduate through career.
Absolutely.
So.
And also, like I said, they have to make a partnership with the parents. I am very involved. I'm very active in my children's education. And this is just me personally. I feel like if I'm bringing you information that's going to help you with my child, then don't give me pushback. Just at least listen to what I'm bringing to the table. One, I raised that child. I know what I'm doing. Two, let's partner in how to correctly bring that child to where they need to be. Special education or not, I have expectations for my children. Just because they have a disability doesn't mean they can't do. So I push them as far as they can go.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Joshua Lynn. Welcome.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Joshua Lynn, and I am a part of an organization here in North Avenue called Associated Student Congress of Baltimore City, and I am vice president of that board, and I also currently attend Baltimore City College High School. I just wanted to piggyback off of what everyone said tonight. Great points about everything, especially the last presentation. But first I want to attack racial equity. I've been in Baltimore City Public School System since I've been in pre-K, and it has been inequity between racial-wise, and I have seen it as a student coming in within Baltimore City and raised in Baltimore City. I just want to make sure that we also make sure that racial is a key thing, like you just said earlier. Racial should be number one thing that we should attack, and that should be granted just human basic rights that we shouldn't have to fight for. Like, I don't have to sit here and just ask you for racial equity. You should give it to me regardless of who I am. But that's racial equity. Teachers, once again, teachers that are wanting to teach, of course, we want to make sure that teachers are wanting to teach, but we also need to make sure that teachers are inside the classrooms that look like these students. We know Baltimore City is predominantly African American, and we know that having from my personal experience, I came from a school, Guilford Elementary Middle School, and we are a community school, and one of the main problems we were having is that students were not connecting with the teachers as much, and that was because one of the reasons was because they were not of same race or ethnicity. I'm not saying we should gather Tyrone from down the street to actually teach our students, but we need to actually get someone that has the same degrees, of course, and that is striving and willing to teach people, and just to make sure that they are succeeding in life, and even just on a personal level where teachers can connect with the students one-on-one to make sure that they are striving to make great decisions, especially African American males. As one of myself, we live in a Baltimore City where there's killings left and right, black on black crime or whoever crime. It just doesn't matter. Crime is crime. I feel like we need to make sure that we are making an effort, and coming in teachers school is such a second home for other people, because some other people I know is their first home, because some people are homeless and they don't have this special things that people do have, and they already have homes. So school is a really resourceful place, and I feel like that it should stay resourceful. I come from Baltimore City College, where there's tons of people and different ethnicities and different donors and everyone that is just great and extravagant wants Baltimore City to strive. Baltimore City College High School to strive, but the schools that are doing low down and not really getting the exposure that they are needing is really just putting them in a hole where it's not really great for them, and they're not really getting the expectations that they need, or they're not seeing the right people that they need. Another thing for pre-K, to ensure enrollment increase, I was previously on a board for enrollment crisis in Baltimore City, and one of the things we looked at statistically is that pre-K, first grade, don't quote me, but first grade is around that area is when students start to drop out, or students start to, their parents take them to somewhere else, whether it's a different country or a private school. I feel like once we do attack this and we get more funding for them, I feel like we should make sure our strong strive to make sure that they stay within Baltimore City public school system, and to also make sure that they are getting and we also get feedback from the parents of the students, and regarding special ed, or even people that don't have special ed, like regular people or people that are gifted. We should all make sure that they are being equitable, and just not even racial wise, but just equal in general. We know that Baltimore City has some of the oldest buildings in Maryland alone. We talk to people that are from Charles County and Carroll County and Montgomery County, one of the richest counties ever. And it's just like, we're sitting here and we sit on these boards as president and vice president of Baltimore City as alone, and we sit here and we just look at these people, and they look exactly like us, specifically Charles County and PG County, that are predominantly African American as well, and we sit there and they are striving more than us, and they're doing some things better than us. So I feel like we should take from different counties as well to make sure that we are succeeding in the right path. But that's a side question. But just generally, teachers within the classroom, racial equity, and definitely crush down on the pre-K and enrollment crisis.
Commissioner Blagneva?
I'm sitting here and I'm so thrilled listening to you. What grade are you in at City?
I am a freshman.
Huh?
Freshman.
I am thrilled. You know, I feel like I'm sitting in a department meeting at Morgan State University, and I was so enjoying what you were saying, because it's really very accurate, that I was sitting here I have a list of names of resources and authors that I normally at a meeting would tell you who to read and who, just like you would have wanted the professors at Morgan or any other university. I am really impressed with you saying, and everything. You're really on the right track. And what is your major? No,
high school.
what were your major, he knows what his major, what is your major gonna be?
Oh, I want to be a lawyer,
Huh?
litigated lawyer, criminal justice.
Exactly, I know you know what you want to do, but I'm sitting here thinking that you're eloquent, and I'm impressed, and you continue what you're doing, and, I'm listening to everything you're saying, and I know that,
Hassan.
I'm just, Dr. Hassan and all of us are here, and more from Morgan State University, and she's probably, I'm thinking, you're thinking the same thing. You sound like one of the professors. But thank you so much, and I'm so glad you came.
Thank you.
AJ?
Oh, Joshua, sit down. 2 weeks ago?
Yes.
2 weeks ago, the mayor convened her panel to interview the new board commissioners. And Mr. Lynn sat on that panel. And obviously I can't discuss because everything that they did is confidential. But I will tell you that each and every candidate, when they left the room, the very first question they asked me was, who is that guy? He represented the mayor in this city exceptionally well. And I will tell you that because of Mr. Lynn, the candidates that were forwarded were because of the questions that this young man was asking. And the candidates that weren't forwarded was because of the answers that they were not giving to Mr. Lynn's questions. And I don't want to say anything more than that because I don't want to disclose anything that's confidential. But Mr. Lynn, you did a phenomenal job, and you're going to be a great litigator. Juana's sitting right there.
Thank you.
She's a lawyer. I'm a lawyer, and you should reach out to us.
Thank you,
we can help.
definitely.
Commissioner
have
Bodima.
one more thing to say. I have 3 biological children and 2 stepchildren. All my children are lawyers, okay? So I sit amidst all of this all the time. So, but what I wanted to say, listen to you, I said, no, I can't go there with him. When I listen to you talk about cultural response and pedagogy, I'm a scientist, and my dissertation is in all science and education. And there's so many things, so many studies they have done on different cultures of teachers teaching in the classroom and with the different students. And one of the things that at one time I'd like to talk to you, because what the studies showed that is when people think you have to have the same culture in the classroom, that works in some cases, but when you study it hard enough, you'll find that it really doesn't. And I have many, many research books that you can read and enjoy to listen to that. And mostly, one of the best ones was done in the Native American community with non-Native American teachers and Native American teachers that showed one showed that the Native American teachers did better with the Native American students, but then the other studies, when I was talking about Gloria Latson Billingsley, when I mentioned to you, she will show many studies that show that the white teachers did some did better than the African American teachers. So anyway, that's a big another conversation.
No, it's great because
So I'm not going to go there because I'll be here all night, and they don't want that all night. But anyway, I just want to tell you that we one day we'll have that conversation.
Anyone else?
No,
So first off, I want to thank district staff for being willing to try this a different way. And then thank my colleagues on the board for being willing to take a chance and to get public input first. We really do believe the public's important and believe the public, what you have to offer is first forward and does matter, but we don't always act in a way that seems reflective of that. I also would love to sort of hold Joshua up for a second, as we've illuminated a lot of issues and a lot of negatives and a lot of concerns with the district tonight. We also do have these spots of absolute radiant brilliance. And it's not just one child or young man, sorry. And it's not just one school, and it's not just one program. But there's some really pretty phenomenal things going on in this district. Yes, work to do. And yes, we have to be brutally honest and transparent about that. But I have great hope and faith in walking lockstep with this community, that we are on the right direction. We have the CEO to be able to make that happen. And we have a board that's very much in support of doing the right thing for the right kids right now.
And I would just encourage all the parents that haven't been, go to the Kerwin Commission and say what you're saying.
Yes, yes. with that, at 7:37 PM, we are going to adjourn. Thank you very much.